So it is 6 o'clock, and I'm going to call this special meeting workshop of the Board of Trustees to order for May 3rd. It is 6 o'clock. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Bartholomew?
Here.
Edwards?
Here.
Fowler?
Yes.
Hart?
Here.
Parker? Kwasniewski?
Here.
President Malzahn?
Here.
All seven are present.
Excellent. At this time, can I get approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Poznanski, support by Parker. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public comment? Anybody here want to make public comment? Hearing none, we will move on to our first presentation. So with us tonight, if anybody wasn't introduced, Danielle did such a great job. Come on in, you're fine. We've just started, so.
I'm sorry, I was working the election today, so I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for doing what you do.
All right, well, you're welcome.
Right,
Thank
Pam Ketchum.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have Danielle Kelly here with us. So she is our accountant on file. She's the one that actually comes to the office, and apparently she has a magic wand, and you'll see that in the budget later. Doing a great job working with Catherine and the staff to get this done. And then her boss, Brian, is it Camelier? Cameler, yes, from Plant Moran. And so he sort of overlooked the final product that Danielle and Catherine worked on, gave some input. We had a quick little Teams meeting, and he thought that because this is Plant Moran's first year, things may look a little bit different than what we're used to. He has given other presentations to other municipalities with a sort of a budgeting overview, and so he has a great PowerPoint presentation. He just wanted to take a minute and make sure that we all knew what our functions were. So, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the podium.
Okay.
I'll take this.
I don't,
Or does it?
I couldn't get it to work.
Well,
Just
this is
tell me.
answer me.
Yep.
Okay, we'll go to the next one.
Good evening. So first of all, I do want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to serve the village. So Plant Moran, if you're not familiar with us, we're the largest accounting firm in the state of Michigan. We have more CPAs than any other firm. One of our specialties is working with local units of government. And if you do know us through that, it's probably as the preeminent auditor of local units of government. I'm a retired auditor, as is Danielle. We've moved to your side of the table. So, you know, an auditor is not an adversary to the community, but they have to stay independent. They have to stay at arm's length. They can't help you with as much as they may like to. But what Danielle and I do for 60 municipalities across Michigan, along with our team of 25 other people, is we do internal accounting to either supplement what you already have or supplant, just completely take over the accounting operations for some communities. Because it's a very difficult job market right now to find trained municipal accountants. The need has never been greater. If you go out to the Michigan Municipal League's classified ads, the length of open jobs looking to be filled is as long as I've ever seen in the almost 4 years that I've been doing work with local units of government. So again, I thank you very much for the opportunity to come work with you. Budget concept. So we're all very familiar with an internal budget for our own household, or if you're a business owner, you understand the general concept. You know, it's a plan. How much money do we think is going to come in? How much money do we think is going to go out for the year? In the state of Michigan, for a local unit of government, it's that, and. The and is its authorization to spend. So according to the Budget Act, it is illegal for a local unit of government to spend a single penny that hasn't been otherwise appropriated. This is why every year at the state level, at the federal level, you hear, well, if we don't get this budget passed by midnight on the last day of the year, we're going to have to do a shutdown. Why do we have to do a shutdown? because if that budget hasn't been passed, then the money hasn't been appropriated, which means the next day when the first employee shows up to Village Hall and they try to open the door, they've incurred time that it's a cost to the village. And so we have to have this budget passed in order to maintain our operations on the first day of our fiscal year. So that's really what this is saying. The first one is the plan. Point two is that, point two is general fund and all special revenue funds are required by law to have a budget. Although you have other funds in excess or in addition to that, while it's not required by law to have a budget for those funds, it is certainly a best practice to budget for all of your funds. And then the third point here is the Budget Act. It's actually Public Act 2, but in this case, it was amended by Public Act 621 back in 1978. Next slide, please.
Can everybody see that? Should we shut the other lights off?
Yes, please.
Do you mind? Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
All right, so what goes into a good budget process? So we go into a lot of communities that they slap it together. And I'm not suggesting that you ever did that before we came around. But in a lot of places, they don't give it the full 360-degree look that you really should if you're going to have a best-in-show budget document. So it's not just about 1 year. It's also about what just happened, how it affects what we think is about to happen in the following year. But at the same time, it also takes a longer-term view. So yes, you can always look just 1 year in advance. But you should know from your own personal finances, if you only look 1 year in advance, you're missing the boat on what you need to do long term. So I have two children. They're 11 and 13. I wouldn't start to think about funding their college when they turned 17 and are seniors in high school. From the moment that they were born, I started planning to eventually send them off to college and have put aside money every year. Municipal government is no different. So yes, we have to appropriate money to pay our current operations, but we should still also be looking long term. When does the roof need to be replaced? When does the road work have to get done? The computers we have only have a useful life of so long before they need to be replaced. And so thinking more long term, taking into account our current operations, but also saving for that eventual capital outlay. And then in the year that the capital outlay happens, being okay with the fact that we're going to spend more money in that year than more than we brought in. Totally fine. Look at it as a long-term enterprise, what the village is. Focusing on outcomes. So it's one thing to say we're going to spend money, but what's the point of spending the money? The end result is a service for the community, or it is a good, some kind of physical object that then provides value to the members of the community. And that could be a vehicle, it could be a computer, it could be the furniture in this room. But there are things that are both short-term, things that are long-term, and there's a point to it. Always remember that the point is eventually providing service to the people that live here. It's an opportunity to communicate your ideas as a board to the public. Now, I'm not so naive as to think that every member of the community is going to look at your budget document, watch this meeting, hear me speak, and understand what we're doing. We know that's not the case. But for those that do, this is your opportunity to tell them, here's where we came from, and here's what we're planning on doing now. You entrusted us with your tax dollars, and here's what we're going to do with them. And if you don't care for what we're going to do with it, you do have an opportunity through the budget process to come and discuss. Give us your input, or just tell us that you agree with it. It also provides an incentive to government management employees. And I always had a problem with this bullet point for years, because I'm like, well, what's the positive incentive? And I was told, well, no, actually, it's a negative. It's an incentive not to get punished in some way. So it's more stick than carrot, because we're not giving bonuses based on performance. That's not the way local government works. But at the same time, we are providing very clear guidelines to our department heads and our employees to say, this is what you've been entrusted to do this year. And you've been given a finite number of dollars to do it. And so you are going to do your job and provide service within this framework. Now, that is not ironclad, and we're going to spend a couple minutes on a future slide talking about the amendment process. But a budget document is alive. It is a breathing, living document. So just because we do it and put it on paper and print it and then we have that paper forever, the contents of the budget, it's always moving. Things are happening that we weren't anticipating, or things are happening faster than we thought, slower than we thought, or things just come out of left field. And so we have to be able to amend that document in order to capture what's really happening at the time. That's what this bullet never stops. Just because at some point you are going to vote on a budget and pass a budget, it doesn't mean that the budget process is over. The budget process is all year long. You are either planning for the budget, adopting the budget, or executing and monitoring the budget. It is all year long, constant. It's not just this short, finite period of time right before your fiscal year begins. Next slide, please. So the adoption of the budget is spelled out in Public Act 2, as I mentioned earlier. And there's a difference between the budget document and the General Appropriations Act. So the budget document is the full book. It's what you're used to seeing. It's got a lot of detail in it. It may give you some story along with some numbers, but it's the Appropriations Act that you're actually voting on to approve. So the Appropriations Act, that's the more legalese sounding document that has some whereas and therefores in it. That's where you are officially approving how much money can be spent, along with the number of mills that you're authorizing to be levied. There can be a difference in the level of detail between what is presented in the book and what you are approving in the Appropriations Act. So usually, a local government is going to approve the general fund at an activity level. And that detail may be at the account level detail. So you may have an account for paper clips, you may have one for pencils, you may have one for wages. But in the Appropriations Act, it's either being adopted at the full fund level or it's at the department level that says the police department is going to spend $500,000 and part of it's going to go to wages and part of it's going to go to fringes and part of it's going to go to gasoline for the car. But we're going to let the police department figure out whether they pay for pencils or they pay for bullets or they pay for gas. It's all within their $500,000. The Appropriations Act says $500,000. All that detail is for discussion and explanation, telling you what that $500,000 can do. Next slide. So this is just a quote. Now, I think we've got another slide about this, but this is a very misunderstood point, and it's what I was alluding to earlier, talking about my kids and saving for college. What is a balanced budget? Most people will say a balanced budget is one where revenue equals expense, and that is incorrect. A balanced budget is when revenue and available fund balance, your savings account, is greater than or equal to expenditures for the upcoming year. Because you are allowed to adopt a budget that uses some or all of your fund balance. But you are not allowed to adopt a budget where you spend more than the sum of your savings and the revenue that's going to come in. So if you adopt a budget that results in a deficit, that is illegal. It's a violation of Public Act 2. But if you adopt a budget that, like my college plan, the year my son goes off to college, I am going to spend more money than I bring in that year. I know that, and that's okay. My budget for that year says I have my regular operating expenses plus sending my kid off to school is greater than the revenue I bring in for the year. But I have the savings account. And I'm not going to go broke sending my kid to college. I'm going to use up some of that savings account. Your budget is exactly the same. Next slide, please. And here we go. Fund balance plus revenue is greater than or equal to expenses. It is okay to use fund balance. Can't use it all the time. We don't want to use it to pay wages. That's an operating expense. And if you constantly pay more in wages than you have coming in, you're going to go broke. But if you save up for those special things, a new police car, a new fire truck, a roof on the building, redoing the parking lot, those only happen every so often. So it makes sense that you saved up money previously, spend it now, versus trying to bake that into this year's spending coming out of this year's revenue. It just doesn't work that way. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the budgets all year long. These are the 4 stages. We are currently in 2 stages, actually. We are preparing for the next year's budget, but at the same time, we're monitoring and executing. So really, we're in 3 stages. We're executing and monitoring the budget you adopted a year ago. So part of what we've been engaged to do is keep an eye on your budget to actual. So if and when your actual operations are skewing from what the budget says, like, hey, some other things are happening this year, we've got to go off in a little bit of a different direction, we need to, that's our monitoring, and then bring to you an amendment to let's get it back on track. In a perfect world, and I don't work in a single community that's perfect, in a perfect world, you wouldn't spend a dollar or a penny that had not previously been appropriated. But you don't have an airtight purchasing system. You're going to occasionally go over budget on a line, not know it until the accounting department brings to you a report that says, oops, you went over, or you were trending over, here's an amendment to get you back on track. Totally normal, technically illegal according to the Budget Act, but all 60 communities that I work in will operate the same way because they don't have an airtight purchasing system that wouldn't allow you to incur an expense without there being budget available. It just doesn't work that way in reality. The adoption part, that is the quickest and easiest, right in the middle. That could be a 5-minute discussion where you, at the meeting that you go to vote, it's just a matter of taking roll call and deciding yes or no, this is what we're going to do. That's quick and easy. But the execution and the monitoring, that's the rest of the year. Next slide, please. So Public Act 2, it explains that there is one person in every municipality whose responsibility it is to have that budget drafted and then present it to the legislative body. So in Public Act 2, it describes that person as the chief executive. And so in this case, in a village environment, it would be the president. In a city, it's either going to be the mayor or the city manager. In a township, it's going to be the supervisor. That is the person that is considered the chief executive officer of the municipality. So now that individual doesn't necessarily have to be the one that puts the numbers together. Totally fine to delegate it, totally fine to outsource it. But at the end of the day, whatever work we do, whatever work accounting staff do, that information gets aggregated, given to the CEO, and it's the CEO's responsibility to then present to the legislative body as a whole. And it's up to the legislative body to either approve it as is or give the recommendations for what they would like to see changed before they will grant their approval. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the public having an opportunity to talk about what they wanted to see or to voice their disapproval for what is in the budget document. You're required to have a public hearing before the budget is adopted. There is no requirement in Public Act 2 that any length of time has to elapse between the public hearing and the voting. Some communities will do it at the meeting before, so then you've got a month or 2 weeks of an opportunity to make changes, consider what the public said, decide if you want to make anything different before voting on it. Other communities have the public hearing immediately before the meeting when the budget gets adopted. Totally fine either way. I always find it comical myself, though, when we ask the opinion in the public hearing, is there anything you'd like different? What are your thoughts? And folks get up and they voice their opinions, and then we immediately go to vote on it. So you're not really giving an opportunity to make any changes to that budget. But at the same time, it's totally fine. Getting their opinion doesn't mean that you have to act on it, but they have a right to voice their opinion, to tell you they like something or don't like something. Next slide, please. So within your general ledger, so you use BS&A, which, by the way, I'm not paid by them, but it's my favorite software. I love BS&A. We find it to be the easiest to use. So we're very happy when we go to a new client and they are on it. But within BS&A, we're going to keep track, and you keep track, of actual activity. And in those same accounts for actual activity, there is a corresponding budget amount. Now, I mentioned you're going to adopt the budget based on the Appropriations Act that may be aggregated, either at the fund level or the department level, but your general ledger and the detail in the back of the budget document is at the account level detail. So there's a 1-to-1 ratio that if there is a budgeted number for either revenue or expenses, there's going to be an actual number of revenue or expenses right next to it. You've seen budget to actual information before. And the second bullet point here, I've already talked about it several times, but it's going to happen that life didn't work out the way you planned. I thought I was going to be 6'2". I ended up being 5'8.5". Something changed, right? So my plan had to change. I could not be a professional athlete. I had to become a CPA. And so, like my plan for life, your plan for how your year is going to change. A car is going to break down you didn't anticipate. An employee is going to quit and need to be replaced. Sinkhole, God forbid, happens in the middle of downtown. But something unforeseen happens. You couldn't have anticipated it during the budget process, but you have to deal with it. And so an amendment is necessary in order to get you back on track. And it should be expected that the budget that you pass is not going to be the budget at the end of the year. It's just to get you started. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite slides. I try to include this as much as possible. When is this instant you take the vote and bang the gavel, congratulations, we've passed the budget for the next year, it is instantly obsolete. Why? Because we're not making changes to the Appropriations Act or to the budget document up to the minute that you vote. A lot of the work is done a couple weeks or a couple months in advance, and you really don't have the opportunity to vet and re-vet every number in it all the way up to the vote. But in that time, between when it was prepared and when you vote on it, stuff happens. And that stuff changes what the trajectory of your fiscal year is. And so we know as soon as we bang the gavel and it's passed, great, it's a milestone we can move past, but now we're immediately moving from the adoption phase to the execution and monitoring phase. It is not uncommon in what we do that at the very next meeting after the budget's been adopted to bring an amendment. Now, we don't want to bring amendments to every meeting because you have a lot of other more important business to deal with than just making sure that the budget's constantly perfect. We prefer to do it about on a quarterly basis, maybe 3 times a year, certainly no less than that, because there's always something that's going a little bit off track. I've been to some communities where it's been requested that every time you know one number is going off, we want a budget amendment. And we'll do what we're asked, but it's not my recommendation because it takes up a lot of time. 3, 4 times a year should be sufficient for amendments. But that monitoring, you have a responsibility for as a legislative body. And so you should be seeing budget to actual numbers at least bi-monthly, if not monthly, so that you can see if something's starting to go a little bit off track. Now, just because it starts to go a little bit off track in the first month doesn't mean you need an amendment right away. You can wait and see if it course corrects on its own, because you're not in violation of the budget until you actually go over spending on that number. Now, I mean, just look at, divide everything by 12 on monthly expenses. We're looking at monthly budget to actual report. So that first month, you should be at 8.5%. Well, something might be at 10. That's not cause for alarm. Just like being at 7 is not cause for celebration. But it should trigger the thought, let's look at that next month and see where we're at. Are we at 17% after 2 months? No, we're at 15. Okay, well, that's fine. Looks like we might end up with some cushion later on down the road. But we're not going to necessarily amend the budget until later on where it's like very clear. We're going to eventually go over on this. So now that's something like wages or utilities that happen every month, or wages, every other week. But if it's a capital purchase, like, oops, there was a sinkhole, that's something we're going to amend right away as soon as we know. Or that police car we weren't planning on replacing completely broke down or got totaled. Obviously, we need a brand new one as quickly as possible. That's an amendment that should happen, as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, the budget is a living, breathing document all year long. It's not just a book that sits on the shelf the rest of the year. Next slide. So how do you monitor? We mentioned the budget to actual reports. Certainly when proposals are brought to you or purchases are brought to you, you as a legislative member should say to yourself, is this planned for? If it's not planned for, do we need an amendment? If it is planned for, did we budget enough? Capital projects are often hard to estimate the cost. It's not uncommon to have construction overruns or project overruns. And so you have to ask yourself, do we have enough here? Or perhaps once it's done, it was great, but we over budgeted. We had too much of a cushion. Do we want to have that cushion go back into our savings account, our fund balance? Or do we want to reappropriate the difference and put it to something else that maybe we didn't think we had room for in the budget earlier? There's an opportunity there to do something additional that you didn't think you had room for earlier. So how does it get reported to you? Really, an export out of BS&A is adequate for seeing the line items. However, it definitely helps non-financial people, and we certainly recognize that not everybody is an accountant, that perhaps a one-page memo to go along with it with, these are the 3 things you need to know this month. We bought this thing that was unplanned for, or the expenses are trending better than we thought, expenses are trending worse than we thought. Hey, we lucked into an extra $30,000 in a grant that we weren't expecting, or the state of Michigan gave us more state share revenue than what we had originally planned. That's a good thing. It should be a mix of good and bad, just so you know what is going on. And you don't necessarily have to be an accountant, or you don't necessarily have to go line by line through the entire general ledger and say, well, this one's up and this one's down and that one, oh, it's off 1%. We don't expect, we'll tell you the things that we think you need to know. Certainly willing to answer questions if there's something else that we haven't thought of that you'd like to know. Next slide, please. Oh, so that's it for the budget stuff. When we get to Danielle, she's actually going to go through the details of what is in your present draft of the budget, things that have changed from prior year, revenues that are going up, revenues that are going down, expenses up or down. And it's not set in stone. So if there's something in here that you collectively, or at least a majority, likes or don't like, there's certainly an opportunity to continue to make changes. Even if it gets all the way through the process, like I said, you can always amend. That's actually one of the beautiful things about preparing a budget. Number one, I know I'm going to be wrong because I'm always going to be wrong. Something's going to change. But we have an eraser on our pencil, and we get a chance to make the correction when we have better information. Any questions about the process, Public Act 2, or anything else that I talked about? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was very thorough.
Hi, everybody. I think I've met most of you before the meeting, but my name's Danielle Kelly. I'm the accountant on staff on site, and I did a majority of the bulk work of this budget. So I'm the one to go through it with you guys. So for fiscal year 2023, we'll start with the general fund. I believe the previous accountant, Tim Sadowski, discussed this with you previously. So the first item in the general fund is the property tax. We are moving the rubbish millage to its own fund, so you do see a drop in property tax between this fiscal year and next fiscal year's budget. But that revenue and corresponding expense for the GFL contract has been moved to another fund. So revenue went down, but expense also went down. So it's almost a net, just so you know. Another item with property tax is that Macomb County has, yep.
Can you just go back and just explain why we're doing it that way? Because
Oh.
I don't think anybody, or maybe they don't understand exactly why we're making that change.
Oh, you can
Yeah,
jump in anytime.
yeah, anytime,
That's fine.
anytime. Okay, so the reason why we need to move the rubbish millage into its own fund. Currently, the General Village Law Act, only the cap amount of mills that you're allowed to levy is 12.5. Your L4029, which is the document that you submit to the county that says, in the state, that says the amount of mills per authority that you're gonna levy, you had set at 15. That included a 2.5 millage for rubbish. So you're only allowed to be at 12.5, you were at 15. So we're taking the 2.5 out of the general operating line and putting it into a rubbish line.
And by the way, just a side note, we went back as far as records allowed at the state
Early
level.
80s,
and
yep.
It's always been that way.
What's the
So-
rubbish for?
It's to pay the Green for Life
GFL,
contract,
for our
the
common
GFL
waste
contract.
Your trash and recycling pickup. That-
For the residents?
Yes.
Well, for the entire village, everybody pays that tax.
But does it include the downtown area or just the residential area?
So our budget includes the central business district.
It does include the central business.
We put in a budget for it.
And that's this rubbish budget you were talking about right now?
Yes,
So you shifted things around in order to accommodate this?
yes.
Well, it's so that it's being disclosed correctly on that L4029 form. Quite frankly, the county should have noticed sometime in the last 30 years that you were filing it differently. It doesn't change the amount that anybody's paying. It's the same millage. It's just being reported on two different lines, or same number of mills being reported on two different lines. And then on the expense side, because it is a dedicated millage for rubbish, you should be keeping track, because in any one year, you're either going to make money or spend more than you brought in, and whatever that running surplus is, shouldn't go toward something else, anything but rubbish.
The taxpayer dollars are going towards the funding of this rubbish.
Rubbish money should just pay for rubbish. It shouldn't go to pave the parking lot or put a roof on.
The taxpayer dollars are going towards it, yes.
Going toward, absolutely.
Every taxpayer, yep, is paying the
Well,
same.
I mean, central
same
business
tune-in.
district to clean up the rubbish. Okay, all right.
No, wait a minute, what?
As you said, it's for the central business district.
Well, it's
Right,
for
because
No,
everybody.
it's
they
for
pay
everybody,
everybody.
but we've included a budget
You included
to
the
include
central
them as
business-
well.
Yes, so
Yeah.
you lap that into it.
Yeah,
Because they pay the tax.
they pay the tax.
And so is that the whole central business district? Is that every business that's being included?
Yes, we did an estimate until they actually decide to be part of the contract. Is that correct, Christine? That they're not currently, not a
They're
lot
not
of them are
currently
participating in the contract,
But they have always paid the tax.
but they've paid the tax.
They're just
So,
not getting the service, even though they've paid the tax.
But it's every business.
Everybody who gets a tax bill.
Every
Everybody who
taxpayer.
gets a tax bill is paying that.
'Cause I know
tax.
last time we talked about it, it wasn't gonna be every business, it was only ones that could have, like, rolling carts. It wasn't anyone that had to have dumpsters or anything like that.
Well, that was when it was all rolled into the general fund.
Yeah.
And that's why we had it estimated. But now that it's specifically called out and we are corrected on what we can and cannot do legally, we can't have somebody paying the tax and not receiving the service.
Well, that's the same thing basically for these people at the condominium complex, paying the tax and not receiving the service.
How does,
Well, that's private property. it's different.
Right.
How does that work for like, Apple Valley or, Peyton Way? You know, the condos there with their dumpsters, are they included then also?
If they have a dumpster corral, they are paying the tax and not getting the service. Because right now, our contract does not include any dumpsters, only the wheelie carts and the
Yeah, I
recycle
understand. I
bins.
just wanna make
Yeah.
sure that when we're approving this, if we're saying we're gonna give it to the business, we're including everyone, not just.
Everybody who pays the tax should be getting the service. Otherwise, you have to do an exclusion when you levy the tax and exclude that area. Like, we don't pay Bruce Township Fire and ALS because they've carved out the village, right? So even though we're in Bruce Township, our taxpayers don't pay for that.
Is this the
Wouldn't
time?
some DDA should be working with, I mean, towards, as far as rubbish pickup in the central business district? I mean,
Because
no.
it's part of our,
Wouldn't it be
it's
DDA
part of our
tax?
tax
Part of
levy.
our
Residents
yeah.
and the residents' taxpayer dollars to help fund. the
We only have one hauler.
downtown.
Is this the time that we would flush this out?
Absolutely,
So I have some
because
questions.
this is kind of a huge question.
I mean, we can talk about this when we get to the rubbish fund. It might
Okay.
be a better
Yeah,
time.
Let's continue on. and then
Okay.
we'll get to the rubbish.
Hold it for
Okay. So, back to property tax. Now, the numbers you have in front of you use the prior year millage rollback, because Macomb County has not released that number yet. On their website, they say it is going to be released May 9th, so next Tuesday. So just keep that in mind when looking at those property tax numbers. They will change once we get that from the county. I don't know. Until the county releases it, we're not sure. So for estimate purposes, we use last year's rollback.
It will not be a significant change either way, but it's likely to, if it's a rollback, it will be a reduction, slight.
State share revenue is projected to go up, according to the state's estimates, by 8.6%, because that's due to the census.
It's a combination of census changes, and state shared revenue is driven by sales tax. So the fact that the cost of stuff is greater, then we're paying more sales tax on the stuff that we buy. So the one good thing about the inflation is you're actually going to get some money back to the community to help fund operations.
The personal property tax reimbursement, which is the LCSA payment, is expected to be consistent from prior year. We did include a reimbursement for the proposed school resource officer, but that decision is still pending from Washington and Bruce Township. So that is a maybe item in there, that
Just a
reimbursement
correction,
line.
It's not Washington, it's the school board.
I'm sorry, school
But
board.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say that.
So that's a maybe item. We're waiting to see what their decision is on that. The new line in here that you're going to see is we're estimating a distribution from the state for the marijuana revenue of $112,000. Now, that is estimated based on that the village has issued 2 licenses, and the prior year distribution from the state was about $56,000 per license.
I would expect that to go up. My expectation is, I'm not going to bet on it. That's why we're saying same as last year. But if you've driven on any freeway in the state of Michigan, you've seen marijuana billboard every 100 feet. And it went from 27,000 last year to 56,000 this year. I only anticipate that it will continue to go up.
And the reimbursement is only for retail,
Copy.
so that's why it's only 2.
So that's the overview for revenues for the general fund. Now on to expenditures. We were able to include all of the goals and objectives on the last meeting that this body had. So we have the PD portable radios, the Village Hall copier printer, the electrical updates to Village Hall, and then the new resident update for $12,000. We did move the street lighting expense out of the municipal street fund into the general fund. Oh, next slide.
Sorry, failing at my job.
And those are the overview of the major expenses. So an overview overall for the general fund's fund balance, the projected beginning fund balance is going to be about $3 million. We're going to add $138,000. A bulk of that is the marijuana revenue estimate of $112,000. So we're going to increase our fund balance at the end of the year. Next slide. So the municipal street fund is a separate levy, and the street lighting expense shouldn't be part of that fund.
Yeah, when the original ballot language, whenever you passed your municipal street millage, did not include street lighting to it. So unless you want to add a street lighting special assessment, which you could, many communities do, otherwise it should be an expenditure of the general fund.
And how long has that been in place? That's been paid out of that for how long?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, we'd have to go back and look.
Years,
40 years?
just like the other one.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those, we're just gonna fix it now and move on.
Yeah.
So just a comparison for the village compared to other municipalities. Percentage of fund balance for villages is usually about 81% across the board in the state of Michigan. With this fund balance, you guys are at 103%. So you're knocking it out of the park compared to
Yeah.
other villages in the state.
Yeah, I mean, you're above average, but oftentimes if you hear, well, we've got 103% of a year, why do we have so much? It's like, well, it's not so
haven't spent
much.
anything.
You're,
Roads
you
to
know,
fix.
you're 20% higher than the average, but that's not, it's not strange and it's not unusual. It's good for you. You're slightly above average on that.
Okay.
So I need to be quicker on the draw here.
So moving on to major and local streets, these two funds are funded through the Act 51 gas tax. The state's estimate is that this will increase 3.7%. Now, that's not an exact 3.7% because the state has a different year end than we do. So they have a September year end, so you kind of have to juggle the numbers to come up with that estimate for us. We do have routine maintenance allocated in these funds, but we do not have any capital projects allocated for either fund this year. Next slide.
Got it.
Oh,
That time I was on.
So you can see for both funds, we're expecting to add to fund balance, and that's basically because we really don't have any capital projects planned for either of those funds as of right now. Okay, what we talked about before, the municipal street fund. Now overall, you'll see this in the general fund too if you were to compare the numbers with taking out the rubbish fund. Taxable value is expected to increase about 5% net. So net real and personal property. The DDA is budgeted to give $90,000 to the municipal street fund for the mid-block crossing project. And then the other key expenditures in this fund are additional sidewalk repair, same as last year, $50,000. The Powell Road tip project of $141,000, and then the CBD mid-block project, which is shared with the DDA. So in this fund, we are going to use a little bit of fund balance to help fund those projects, about $9,200.
It's totally fine. You have plenty to spare there.
Cemetery fund, same as the municipal street fund. There's an increase in taxable value, so there's some increase in that property tax revenue that's going to come in. There are no capital projects in that fund, so just routine maintenance to the cemetery. Comcast Cable Fund, we're expecting those fees to remain neutral. And there is $67,000 allocated for cable services. That's the contract to MIT TV.
And if you wanted to put in a projector
Yeah.
hanging from the ceiling here, or a giant big screen TV, whatever you like, that could, since it's going to this and it's going out on your local public access cable, totally fine to use the PEG money, which is part of the franchise fee that Comcast pays to you.
I thought, real quick, in the cemetery, didn't we have planned some projects? I thought we were looking at roads and signage and stuff out there.
We did complete some signage projects last year, and the roads, we're still getting estimates. It might be a project where we have to save up for it, to save our fund balance after so many years before we can complete it.
Awesome.
Was the board talking about a columbarium anymore?
No, that went down low to do the priority list.
They may look, when they get those estimates back, the thought was that since we do have a healthy general fund balance, they may borrow from the village to do all of the cemetery roads, including access to that last little acre back there so that we can get that plotted out, but they're still working out the details.
Have we done that before real quick? Because I did see we were gonna be loaning money for the trucks, and that was gonna be at a percentage. I don't remember seeing that where we've ever charged interest and loaned to ourselves. We've never done that, have we?
No.
But that's a normal practice. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, so here you can see the overview of the projected fund balance for cemetery and Comcast. So there is enough money to buy a projector, as you can see in the Comcast cable fund.
Or
If you
it's-
so
it's-
choose.
If there's improvements at the cemetery that, I mean, most cemeteries do need something done. I mean, right now, you're generating a surplus, so, I mean, feel free to add projects to that if you so desire.
Okay, rubbish fund. Okay, so this will be a newly created fund for this fiscal year, 2.5 mils from the operating millage into this newly created fund. So that will generate, based on the current taxable value, $371,000 in revenue. So that's coming out of general fund. If you compare it to last year, you'll see that drop, and that's where this is going. But the GFL contract is also coming out of general fund and going into this fund. So as I said before, revenues are going down, but expenses are also going down in the general fund to create this fund. And so right now, the residents-only GFL contract is estimated to be at $256,000. So we did do an estimate, again, it is an estimate, of if the Central Business District wanted to participate within the contract, what that would cost. And our estimate is $122,000. That does include dumpsters. So I worked with the DDA, we got a list of all the businesses, and we said, okay, who's gonna get a dumpster, who's not, who's gonna get a recycle bin, who's not. We came up with the best estimate we could do at the time, because until people participate, we don't, it's kind of up in the air, but this is our best estimate right now. It'd be about $122,000. So the general fund.
This assumes everybody.
Yeah, this assumes everybody, and, we said, restaurants would probably have a dumpster. The little tiny, the antique shop won't, probably. So we just kind of went through and did our best estimate. So that number may change once businesses decide to go with GFL and come on our contract. But so far, with that, the general fund will need to kick in about $5,600 to keep that fund balanced.
So this is a case where revenue does have to equal expenses because you don't have any beginning fund balance because this is a new fund. Now, if some people don't opt in or some businesses don't opt in and we create a couple $1,000, $5,000 surplus otherwise, general fund doesn't have to put this money in. So it would likely be a end of the year decision where this time next year, are we going to go over budget or are we going to spend more than we brought in this fund? And if the answer is no, then we'll amend to not have general fund kick this money in. If we get to the end of the year and, oops, it's $7,000 instead of $5,600, oh well, but that's what it will have to be to prevent a deficit.
We'll take care of both of our wastewater, DPW, we'll take care of that. Is that in this? Or that's still
No,
being
they still have
No.
waste management because they are under contract with waste management still.
Right now, GFL doesn't service anybody that has a dumpster. So,
You stated earlier that we can't charge a tax to people and not provide the service.
Well,
And it just says central business, right? There's still a lot of businesses and taxpayers that aren't in the central business district. Are they included then?
but you can charge, it's not illegal, but it's not fair that they get charged and they're not able to participate.
I think
What was the second part of your
he's
question?
saying is there are some commercial offices that are on Main Street that aren't in our central
Well,
DDA
I mean,
district.
there's the quarter car wash, there's
Right.
the Dairy Queen, there's the whole industrial
That aren't in
district.
that central
That are all
business,
paying
were they
taxes,
counted?
right?
Are they part of the calculation?
Or was it
I did it
just with
based
the
on the list I
DDA?
got from the DDA for the Central Business District.
Okay, because it is larger than that. And then you probably wouldn't have, the question I have is the revenue that we are collecting from that district, because that's about a third of the cost. And to add I'm wondering the tax base that we're collecting from that specific area. Are those close? Because on the one hand, it's good, we're pretty revenue neutral, which, that's great, but is that disproportionate to the type of service? Our dumpsters a lot more expensive. Now you have commercial buildings that are worth more, but do you have any of that data?
I don't think we really looked at how much each business would pay versus what their incremental cost would be. An alternative to this, if you wanted to do it, is you don't have to charge through property taxes. You can do a user fee. So the community that I was at last night, they do a user fee. And so if you have a dumpster, you pay X. If you are a normal, household, you pay Y, and every household pays Y. So the reason for that is, in their opinion, is that they want each resident, taxpayer, business, member of the community to pay for what they are getting. Versus I have a little dumpy house and you have a big beautiful house, you're paying more for garbage service than I am.
Oh, and
But
so
that's, I mean,
that
that-
little
and that
house puts
goes-
out a whole front yard of stuff too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
But now in our central business district, we have a mixed use. We have residents that live there. Probably they're tenants of the building owners that are paying the tax. So I mean, it is a little bit kind of mixed. But you do have residents that live in the commercial district, and then the commercial buildings that are using the dumpsters. So trying to kind of figure that out is, that's where my question is.
Makes sense.
Are people in the public allowed to ask questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm the director for the DDA. So I guess what I'm hearing is that our businesses have been paying taxes on services they have not been getting for years.
You're
Is that what I'm
correct.
hearing?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Industrial district, multifamily, there's a lot of them.
right. Well, I mean, I represent only one,
Right.
faction
Right,
of them.
but all those do not, right? If you do not have a wheelie cart or recycle bin, you're not getting the service,
Wow, okay.
so.
Vice versa, there's money that goes to the DDA that doesn't come to residents, right? I know it benefits everybody,
But that's that tax is collected specifically for that. We're talking about.
but
That's
by
a separate
residents,
fund.
right? Residents also pay into that,
No.
correct?
Unless
No,
you
no.
live there.
That tax is
No.
only
No.
in the central business district.
That's what I'm saying, if you live within the
If you
central
live
business
inside the
district.
central business district, then
Yes.
you're paying the tax, yes. But there's very few of those.
Mm.
So, I don't
So,
know.
right, this is kind of a biggie.
No, I know it
It's-
is.
It's kind of a biggie, and
I think it'd be great if it would cost $122,000. That's,
Again, that's our estimate.
Yeah.
They could ask for more, they could ask for less than what we estimated until
So
they
now, can we keep
participate.
this as a fund balance, even though if we don't have the contracts in place, if we're gonna be building in there? I just wanna make sure there's not a huge disparity between how much we're collecting and what the cost is,
Mm-hmm.
and having to do that. If it's close, just like, how much big house or small, that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be nice to consolidate that.
Well, and now that it's going to be tracked separately, if these other properties don't opt in, or if the cost is less than what we were expecting through this calculation, and you start to have a surplus every year, and we don't have to wait 10 years, it's 2 years, start to see a trend, then you're going to have an option in the following year. What do we do with the millage? Do we need 2.5 mils for this, or could it be 2.4, and we'll be fine?
Yep.
But it's a constant moving target that requires at least annual evaluation.
And could we have the millage being two different ones? Can you have one for commercial buildings, and if we needed to have it?
No, it's a single millage that is actually allowed by law.
Okay, thank you.
So if we went with the other method you were talking about, like a special assessment.
It would be a user charge.
So with the millage would go away, and then.
You would be trading a millage for a user charge.
How
Now,
would
what
we
that
find
will
out
mean,
what that
there's
that
going to
would
be
cost?
winners and losers in that calculation. So me and my dumpy house, now I have to pay more. You and your nice, beautiful house, you might end up paying less.
Mhm.
There's a reason I live in my dumpy house, because that's all I can afford.
How would we evaluate that? How would we get that number to see where that would?
So we would have to get from GFL a some kind of breakdown based on the number of pickups that they do, what they're charging. But it would likely be a 2 or 3 or maybe even a 4-tier system, with the extra tiers being depending on what kind of commercial properties you have and what they're picking up there.
I know we just said at the last meeting, it's sometime soon, in the next year.
No, I think we have a year and a half left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the last year and a half of the
I think that might be a nice
contract.
option to see, and then we could even open it up to the industrial district and have everyone, if they want to be on with our tiered pricing or whatever we get,
I don't think you want to include the industrial district.
if they're paying per,
Central business, yes, not the industrial.
but if it's a per
They're still paying the
building
tax.
pickup, it's not a,
Right.
they're paying their
Still paying
set
tax.
rate.
So in my mind, the easier way to do that is to say, okay, we will pay for the wheelie cart. If you want a dumpster, you're taking it on yourself. You have the right to have a wheelie cart and we'll provide that service. If you are a business or an industrial user that needs a dumpster, then, you're waiving the right to that wheelie cart. And
Well, they could still have a wheelie cart and have a dumpster.
Absolutely.
But a dumpster is not.
It would be their expense, right? And we wouldn't have to monitor who has a dumpster and is it 3 yards, is it 5 yards, is it
And
20
it's-
yards? Right, yeah.
And it's fair compared to what residents are
Everybody,
doing.
all the residents get a wheelie cart and a recycle bin. You offer that to everybody who is a taxpayer in the village. They opt in, they opt out.
or could we look at multiple pickups at dumpster corrals in each quadrant of the business district that are, if they gotta be picked up 3 times a week, 4 times a week, that's what we do to compensate all the businesses and everyone down there.
That's what they're doing now, right?
But we don't have a dumpster corral in 3 of the quadrants, so we would
It's all
have to
different.
install
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the DDA, that's a goal, I think, still, to have a dumpster corral in each quadrant.
Yeah.
And
Not in this
consolidate carrier.
Not in this proposed budget, but.
No, but I mean,
yeah.
just in goals, it's
Yes.
nice to get that all consolidated.
It's in the master plan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So for right now, for budgeting purpose, because we're just trying to figure out this, we know we have 122,000. So I think if everybody is in agreement, that you realize what these numbers are, and I'm gonna work with GFL or whoever I need to work with to bring back that sort of proposal. If anybody has any ideas or wants to work on it, I would be happy to defer to that, but if not, I'll just get with GFL and figure every resident, every tax bill, if they had a wheelie cart, what would that cost us?
Right.
If we could look at the special assessment option, I don't know if that's the correct term,
It's not a special assessment, it's a
Service
service
charge.
fee.
service charge, service.
Right.
Similar to your water and sewer bill.
Right, so it would be on your water bill, it would be on your water bill,
Yeah.
not on your tax bill.
Just to see where it is and see how it compares to what we're currently, how it currently breaks down, I think that just to have the option in front of us, I think
It
that'd
can
be a
be
nice
done.
option to have. At least we have more information and more decisions, I guess.
But for the budget, we can.
Well, this is what we're proposing
Yeah.
right now, because,
I don't
It-
think,
It's
We have to
gonna,
put
it would take
something
time
there,
to
right.
implement that change,
Mhm.
so I don't think you can do it by July 1.
right.
This
So,
money isn't going anywhere, it's sitting in that fund.
correct,
Right.
So we can put a pin in it and keep moving for now.
right.
yeah, but I think over the next year, if that is something that the body would like to investigate more,
And we get all those numbers and everything.
Yeah.
I can have
right.
it. That's,
Thank you.
Okay, we got through trash.
So it's revenue neutral.
you know, starting with nothing and bringing in we're spending whatever we bring in this year.
Okay, public improvement. There's no expected transfers in or revenues generated in this fund. So our key expenditures out of here are the Romeo public improvement of $150,000, the Church Street parking lot, sidewalk connection at the middle school, correct? And then the DTE streetlight LED upgrade is a rollover from this fiscal year.
So I have to throw a monkey wrench in that slide, and I apologize, because I got some numbers from HRC,
Okay,
who is getting the bid package together for the Church Street parking lot, so that should be okay. And he's gonna get that posted, so hopefully, I don't know if I'm gonna get that by May 16th, it might be our June meeting, but we'll actually have numbers of what it's gonna cost, and we can decide how we wanna move forward on that. The sidewalk, adding lighting to that area added $100,000 to the budget. So, of according to the engineers, and his best estimate right now, if we wanna put that sidewalk connector and we want it lit, it's estimated to be $200,000.
It's crazy.
Complete, or, I'm confused, you said 100 or are you talking?
It's, right,
Okay.
199,805. Here's the breakdown if anybody wants to see it. It's gonna be on your, agenda for next month to see it, but I just got it, so I just wanted to at least mention it because this is gonna make you a liar, right? If we only have
No,
30,000.
it's budget, it always changes.
And we're gonna move forward, right. So HRC's recommendation on that, by the way, is to just have that as a separate bid item. That way we can decide once we actually get
We
the
don't
bid
have to have
packages.
lighting.
You don't have to have lighting, but I think lighting is necessary.
Go by there in the morning when it's darker out.
Right.
You cannot see, not that you can't, your eyes,
Is
but
it-
it's not lit where they're standing. It's lit, the arm hangs over to the road
Yes.
and the kids are standing here.
Is there anything they can do to expand how the lights are for the road? I mean, I'd like to condense it up in front of my house, but I mean, is there a way that the street lighting can, expand?
That's crazy.
Look at the school,
Not-
they're putting in another parking lot light or something
Shine it across the street.
that would light up.
I mean.
But this is the engineer's recommendation, right? So Mike knew what that project was, he knew what we were trying to achieve. This is what he's saying it would be needed to do that. So, I throw that out there. I don't know if you want her to bump this number up
Weren't
to
you moving
include the
street
full
lightings
thing.
to, I'm sorry, weren't you moving street lightings to, the general fund? Is this a whole different?
This is the
fund?
capital side of it, not the
Yeah.
electricity charge.
Yeah, the street lighting is to pay DTE for the electricity to the street lights. That's what's in the general fund. That was taken out of municipal street.
So the,
This is part of the sidewalk project.
okay.
This is a capital project.
So it sounds to me
So
like, is
this
this
is
to
a
build new
separate-
street lights, basically?
Separate budget-
Yeah.
budget item also.
So we're gonna go from.
I'm sorry?
30 to
This is a separate budget item also.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, there still is an option, because I've talked to Dr. Robinson about this before. Obviously, they're benefiting the most from this infrastructure. He said he's willing to, one, have Barton Mallow take a look at it, because that's their preferred contractor, to make sure that they're bidding it out. And two, to see what in their capital improvement fund they might be able to allocate towards this project. So
Right.
hopefully, it would be split 50-50, I would think, at a minimum. I don't know the answer to that yet. So again, if we're drafting the document, I'd rather be cautious than unprepared, and you need to know what the reality is. If we want to do that, it's $200,000.
And I
Yeah,
can't
and-
imagine that adding on one more, I'm assuming that would be billed to us, to the village.
I'm sorry, what?
Who's
The
gonna pay
electricity.
that bill to put, yes, who's gonna pay for that light to be lit? The village?
I think it includes 3 lights. It's not just one.
No, with the
But would
Right,
that-
several lights.
Would that be included in
The cost of
in the
electricity.
village
Yes,
bill?
I would think it would be
I
billed to
can't
us,
imagine
yeah.
that that's a lot, but if we are the ones paying for that, I would at least throw that mention into the school, that we're gonna pay the bill, could you put the light, we'll pay the bill, something like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
Make those percentages a little more, you know.
And I mean, is that all Romeo kids that would be using that? I mean, it'd be nice, you know, if we're gonna be, we're doing a nice thing, but I mean, to expand it to that, can we get any money from Washington or Bruce? I mean,
Washington is connecting up to, I think, Campground. They're getting all those easements
And
and
they're
connecting up to
picking that
Copperwood so that they can both come east and westbound.
That way.
Right, so I don't know, I don't think Washington, there was a couple of other users. Daryl Raz had once, said, hey, I'd like to contribute this. I mean, I don't know if the school moms want to do a GoFundMe. I mean,
yeah, I mean, because the 30,000.
this is a lot of money, right? Yeah, it
It
is.
is.
It's a lot of money, but I
Well,
think
why?
it's
When did we ever talk about this before?
Just came up.
well, we talked about it in our goals and objectives.
The lighting?
Yeah,
Not the lighting.
not the
Not the
lighting.
lighting.
No,
Not the
it's
lighting.
Sidewalk,
sidewalk,
yes.
We just got hit with that.
Well, we
Lighting.
talked about the light, or that it should be lit, and we've never got the.
Any
Cost.
cost, yes. So,
I wouldn't want him to, why would we pave a sidewalk to the dark lit on the corner? I mean, we can't have the project.
right, you're gonna do it now, you gotta do it now, or you don't do it at all, right? But
On
I
the,
think it's definitely needed.
on the sidewalk connection part, are we gonna do anything right there at, Mussey Street and East St. Clair? I mean, as far as the people coming from the south side, their kids walking across the street to get to Amanda Moore School. I don't think there's any, crosswalk or
Right now, that's not on any of my radar, but it's certainly something, a project that you can, you know, take a look at and figure out how to bring forward. I'm not, absolutely not opposed to that, because obviously school kid safety is what we need to look at, but that hasn't been brought to my attention,
Well, with
so.
the traffic picking up there on East St. Clair Street, it's,
Mhm.
and those kids are now going to Amanda Moore School as opposed to, South grade is no longer there, Hamilton Parsons. Yeah, you know,
Could we also make the
they're
sidewalks
channeling everybody
heated so we didn't have
to that.
Just for the budget, I mean, I'd make a recommendation that we keep the budget at that for the sidewalk, bid it out separate like that is, and see where we can get help with the other half.
To keep it at the 30, or put the 199
No.
in there?
No, I'm saying keep it at the 30 and then.
And use
find out
prior
how
year
much
if we have to?
That's gonna cost, and,
Okay.
you know, then we can still decide whether we're gonna put the sidewalk in or whether we have to wait until the light goes in, but
I'm sure we can
I'd
add,
keep our budget the way
we
it
can add
is.
lighting later, right? This isn't the actual crosswalk light we're talking about, right?
No.
You're saying 3 lights, well, those could be added later. Doesn't have
Or
to
at
be
least in
done.
a separate budget and maybe get some other people to partner with us.
You know.
So that would be my recommendation, keep it. You guys are all okay with that?
Yes, we are, except for that HRC is charging $12,000, almost 12 and a half, for the engineering of it.
The sidewalk?
Mhm.
No, I think
It's gotta be some.
that's gotta be high for just the sidewalk.
Mhm.
Wow. I don't know, that sounds high to me, but
I-
that doesn't include the lights
Give me the back up.
This is for them to design the
Go
whole
ahead,
thing.
Nancy.
with lights.
Right, so they took care of getting the easements, right? They drafted all the right-of-ways that we already obtained. This is for them engineering it with the lights, with the
With the
sidewalk,
lights.
with the jog,
So if we
with
got it
the
all
peninsula.
engineered and set up, we have the engineering, then we can just move forward with it later.
Right, what I'm saying is that they're already invoiced, most of this has already been invoiced, but
So
the
we
total,
need
the total is
42,000.
at 12,000, right, which
So we need 42,000.
well, I guess you have to say, if it's already been paid for, it's in this fiscal year, so it wouldn't affect this budget. So
We already paid.
this is next year, I have to remember
All
that,
right, we'll
okay?
keep that for 30.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack everybody,
It's
but
okay.
If we, right, on the last one again with the DTE lighting, is that the ones on the side streets overhanging, or is that downtown?
that's our central business district.
Central business.
Yeah.
I would like to note, I've had a lot of residents and business owners reaching out with whatever they're replacing it with now, I think is a raw horn.
Mhm.
The different color of light
Yeah.
is.
Well, that was the reason that we were doing that. We were trying to get them all consistent. So the ones that already burn out, get
Yeah,
knocked
that-
down
that-
by a
I think that was more of
vehicle.
the problem was that what they're replacing it with is a brighter light.
Because they
than
can't
what we
get
currently had.
they can't get the old one.
And
They
I think the power
Right.
of the old one is a lot more
Yes.
than the new ones too.
That's what Rawhorn is saying. So they've converted all the ones that they've had to repair.
Yeah, I would-
They
I
convert
would
to the
question-
LED.
I would question that.
Well, at one point, well, I guess you wouldn't go back and put, if there were those, then you'd replace them all with the newer brighter one.
Yeah, I think that's what the
that's
feedback
what
I've
this-
been getting is that they are brighter, they're the whiter light. People like the yellower nostalgic lighting that we've always had in town. And you could go to a less output or less lumen and you can keep that Kelvin or that color, that lower
And they
Kelvin.
have, yeah, LEDs,
It's
they have
available.
colors to them, yep, it is.
Yeah.
But yes, that's what
That's
that
what this
money
does.
was in a joint project, was to convert them all to LED to save money on
Yeah.
electrical costs and
I-
to make
I
them
can
all the
respect that much.
consistent
I
light
just-
color, yes.
I think we should keep the original design, if you wanna say that was there when they were installed, not changing it to something.
I'm not even sure that the DDA
Brighter
wants to
and
move
whiter.
that project forward now,
So
because,
can I just say
Please.
2 sentences or so about
Please.
that? So Justin, it's actually a really good point, something that Christine and I looked at a couple months ago, and, you know, as you both know, we both have like a ton on our plate, so we looked at something that happened, obviously pre-me, this is a few years ago, the DDA and I think the village looked at some different plans to actually replace all the lighting, and I forget what it's called, so I know Christine can speak to it.
Yeah.
But if we look at some of that, to possibly actually change our lights downtown, to create a different, more nostalgic look, if you will, something that hangs down so that the light doesn't shine up brightly. We're having a lot more people move downtown,
Yeah,
who are
in
residential
upper
to
levels
get
and
that
stuff.
light. So
Yeah.
what you're talking about, they talked about the globes themselves, as they age, they will start to yellow. But right now they're bright, and so as time, because they're plastic,
Yeah.
they'll eventually, fade a little bit, kind of like the difference between
Yeah.
a white t-shirt and a.
But
and a-
Yeah,
Since
well, I know,
then-
it's the bulb, I mean, I'm not
But
saying, but I do this on a daily basis, it's the bulb they're putting
Yeah.
in, that's
But
putting out a
hopefully
different light.
we'll come up with a different solution that actually will potentially save money in the long run. It's just,
Yeah.
right now, we can't focus on that, but in the meantime, we can't have lights out. You know,
I
we
can
have to
respect that, I just hate to see us spending money on something that now you said we're gonna look at changing then. So, I don't think it's at anyone's fault, I think
Yeah.
it's just,
But there's some
they've got a
options.
bulb they found that they can use to retrofit that old style.
There's some low-cost options where we might not even have to own the poles anymore,
Yeah,
but we
we
still
looked
pay the
at that
electricity.
before.
But we can,
Yeah.
Yeah, they gave us that presentation.
The DT, yeah.
Mhm.
the concrete.
Well, that's what I shared with Elizabeth, all that documentation, so we could revisit this at any time, right? But right now, the lamp poles themselves are in a state of disrepair. They're all peeling, right? So we said, all right, well, what's more important? Do we replace the lights, the bulbs, convert them all to LED, or do
Yeah.
we have to have them painted? To me, visually, we need to just have them repainted, unless we're gonna replace them altogether, which is significantly more money.
Yeah,
So,
retrofitting is a great option, I think, keep the
But the
cost
quote-
down. I can reach out to Ron and the guys there, and I can direct them in the route for a bulb that would keep what we currently have moving forward, at least for now.
And just we got a cost estimate 2 months ago for painting all of them, and the cost just to
Oh.
paint them was $70,000
Yeah,
from 3 different contractors. Roughly, that's how much it.
that's not bad, there's a lot of poles.
And then with the crosswalk
92.
project going
Yeah.
in, painting it with potential further damage, so we just decided to put a halt on that.
okay,
Awesome.
sorry,
So we'll keep that,
It's okay.
keep that number.
yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, all that in mind that we discussed, so this year's budget is gonna use a significant amount of fund balance in this fund.
So Christine, with your addition there, how much more was the total cost?
$160,000.
Well, that's
Yeah.
more than what you have right there. So
Right.
either general fund kicks in the balance, 11,000, or one of those other projects will need to be modified in some way, or finance it, which you can do as well.
Okay, so next, the DDA fund. Now, for the village, the DDA is simply a pass-through. So revenues equal expenditures. Whatever tax money we take into the DDA, we ship it over to the DDA, and that's what that fund is. So there's again, as we discussed before, an increase of about 5% projected. The ARPA fund. So we're expected to receive the second payment this next fiscal year. So it'll bring the fund, the total amount that we got from the American Rescue Plan Act of $377,000. We have allocated $200,000 to the purchase of a generator for the wastewater treatment plant. So there is a little chunk of money left, which you'll see when we go to the next slide.
And you'll see that those costs and those recommendations from HRC, it came in about $100,000 less than what we talked about. We've been talking 300. You're gonna be asked to approve HRC's recommendation on whatever those components are at your May 16th meeting, so.
When's this 169,000 come in?
The 189,
189.
Should be this summer
this
sometime.
summer. They're expecting to release it.
Are we part of the, I don't know where we fall in the ARPA, where we've already needed to start reporting on this and how we're spending it?
Yeah, I believe everybody had to report by April 30th.
Okay.
Yes, the reporting was done last week.
Even if you change your mind on spending. It was just,
Or
a
nothing to
report had to
report.
get in, and if things change, you can amend it later.
Right now, we are all zeros.
That is correct. 'Cause we have
But
no
we
expenses, we didn't pay for
Catherine
anything
did
yet.
file a form,
Because this is still, it's discussion.
forms, multiple forms.
Mhm.
This didn't have to be made, because this money can be spent for,
Yes.
there's no.
It has to be committed through 2024 and spent through 2026.
Yeah.
We got time.
So the ARPA fund, you see the DDA fund, as I said, is a net in, net out. The ARPA fund, they're our revenues and appropriations, we're expecting to use a little bit, about 12,000, so we have 177 left for something else.
May I ask a question? Sure. So the plan is to spend the 200 grand on a generator for your wastewater treatment plant. Wastewater, do you charge your customers for wastewater treatment?
Yep.
Why not use the ARPA for governmental projects like sidewalks or street lighting or equipment and allow the wastewater treatment plant to charge enough to its customers to pay for the equipment it needs? So here in Michigan, our governmental revenues are limited. You can only raise taxes so much, you only get so much state shared revenue. And while nobody likes to raise water and sewer rates, you have the ability to charge as much as you need to in order to provide service.
Historically, Village of Romeo paid for the wastewater treatment and water bills out of the general fund.
Really?
Yes. And through the last decade or so, we've kind of had to convert that over because we just can't keep doing that through the general fund. And therefore, we've increased people's water rates considerably through the last decade or so. And I think they'd be putting a lot of additional pressure on people with fixed incomes and things like that. That's just kind of where we're coming from.
That's totally fine.
Just
Necessarily-
recently raised to water.
Yeah, we just recently had up it again because we had some water pumps and things like that go out. So.
Well, what I hear you saying though, at least I think in part, is so we had already planned to set aside, was it 100 grand over the next however many years to fund this? And I think what you're saying is we have other users. Are they paying into this generator with what we're charging them? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is the ARPA money is a wonderful opportunity to do a lot of different things. And water and sewer projects are prescribed through the act. It's an allowable use of that federal money, so it's not wrong in any way, shape, or form. But because we have so few options of getting money into the general fund, most communities are opting to do something with the ARPA money that they don't normally have the money to pay for or don't have a revenue source for.
So we could either send a Christmas card with the picture of our new generator on it to all of our residents, or a picture with our new sidewalk that has pretty lights on it, that people will physically see and probably be able to appreciate a lot more than a generator. Is basically
Yes.
kind of what you're
Yeah,
saying.
And the next
Can we
Christmas cards
specifically
would be their
identify a certain
sewer
area
bill.
for the
Which is gonna go
taxation, what you're talking about, like
X%.
industrial park?
Sorry, I got
Oh, I'm sorry.
multiple.
Well,
Please.
to keep away from the residents, I understand that part, but you indicated this could possibly be a source of self-sustaining itself.
Well, it's not sustaining. This is it's
Well,
a two-time
I mean-
payment.
I
When
mean,
this
as far
money's
as-
gone, it's gone.
Yeah, but
And I'm not trying to talk you out
Other
of
ways of
doing this.
raising
It sounds like
revenue,
you had
that's
the
fine.
conversation previously.
Yes, we have.
I'm just pointing out that there is a potential opportunity to do something with $300 and some thousand that you wouldn't normally do. If something goes wrong at the wastewater treatment plant, you raise rates in order to pay for the improvements.
correct.
And a
yes.
generator is an improvement that you would do that for.
And I'm saying, can we identify a certain area, like our industrial park, to help offset that cost?
For the generator,
Well,
your customers would pay for it, whoever your customers are.
And you were
can
just
we
saying-
separate the residents from our?
No, that would be a violation
Okay, all right,
of
thank you, you just
I
answered
think
it right
kind
there.
of what, to my point is, we want our ARPA money came to the village of Romeo, to our village residents. We want that to, I would say, I want that to benefit my village residents. By taking it to the water plant, that also benefits others outside of us.
Well, I don't know that I agree that ARPA money came to the residents. The ARPA money came to the village
To
as a
the
whole.
village, that's
To
what-
every taxpayer, and
To-
that's the
yeah.
industrial, that's the residents, that's our businesses, that's our
Yeah.
offices, that's,
And
But
she's
what I'm
just.
saying is First Township is part of what we service, and so then by doing this, we're actually using some of that money to benefit outside of who that money came to, is kind of what I'm getting at.
How I would think that we would look at this is that money needs to be spent, and it's gotta be spent by this body. What's being proposed, that if we want, we can put it towards other things, and we would have the ability to raise water and sewer rates. As Matt put out, and I agree with, that is a new fee that everybody is paying right now, and the appetite that is, I don't wanna raise those funds. The reason we picked that particular thing is because of the accounting. You have a large project for filling out the paperwork, putting it at something that spent most of the money. My understanding reduces how much reporting you have to do. And that's why we did, we kind of picked a large ticket item to take that up, and that's what we bought with it.
You guys fought us in raising the water rates and the sewer rates anyways.
We just raised
And
like
now you
$12.
want to raise it again because we,
I'm not talking about
I
raising
wasn't-
it.
I fought.
Plan.
That's what the whole
I
thing
voted
is. The
against
money
it.
has
yeah,
to,
they'll vote no.
we have to spend the
I don't think
money.
I was here.
Yeah, you
Yeah, I'm not
That
saying
was
that
before I got voted in.
correct, that I voted no to that. What I'm saying is, we don't need to raise rates, we already planned to set aside $100,000 each year for the next consecutive years to pay for this already, and that didn't include raising any rates. We could just stick to that same plan and use this money for something else.
It's-
And then we're already currently collecting.
Yeah, but
That's what I understand.
it's just, that's
The
just pocket money. I mean, you're just moving it from one pocket.
And the
to
reason
another.
this generator is like a very important generator. That's why we chose to go that route, because if that generator goes down, everything goes down.
Sure.
And we service other communities and such too, so that's the reason I think we went with that, because the importance of that
And with
generator.
that, it was the 200, is that include or deduct was it 28% that Bruce has to pay for upkeep and maintenance?
Well, they
So
already
would that
pay.
also come off that? So
We're
that's like
collecting all that money, and we need to keep that operational.
They
It's-
already
it's
pay a
out of
percentage. to
If
make
it is
money.
if it's an expense to the wastewater treatment
Yeah.
plant, Bruce's pays 30% of that per their contract.
20 and a half or something like that.
So yes, technically, they would be paying for part of that, because I had that conversation with Supervisor Philbrook and said,
So
look, we don't go in and tell your fire department what kind of vehicle or how much they can spend on it, right? Yeah, we're still paying for that ultimately through our $570,000 that we're paying for the contract. Same thing goes with the wastewater. We're entrusted with its care and maintenance contractually. They're paying us 30% for that.
Thank you for the idea.
And normally, that would, just our circumstance, we can't raise it.
Continue, please.
If you raise your water rates, all these rooms will be full for months.
I do a lot of rate setting. I've been in those rooms.
Yeah.
Okay. So next is the Capital Projects Wastewater Treatment Fund. 10% of sewage treatment goes to this fund to fund capital projects. And then we are transferring the ARPA money that we discussed to this fund to help pay for the generator.
Which is how, we said it was really,
The generator,
wasn't it in the
20 plus years.
yeah.
It's almost.
Mhm. But we don't have to transfer the ARPA money, we can just transfer general fund money, prior year fund balance, right? You can transfer money into there and pay for that and put ARPA money someplace else.
Now, are we also putting in the ARPA money, because I know that we can use the same money to help pay for what it costs us to report? It costs money to do all the steps, and you can use that money to also offset.
You could pay administrative costs of
Out of that.
facilitating whatever the projects are, but because you're a small unit, all you have to, it's a couple reports that have to be filed. I'm not sure who did it here last week, or
Catherine.
Catherine did it? Yeah, so it's actually, I wouldn't worry about the administration of the ARPA money. It's not very complicated for someone your size.
Is this what you were talking about, making the 10% that we're already currently collecting for capital projects? Which, didn't you say we're already collecting 100,000 wastewater, which roughly, you're saying that would be like 86 on top of the 200 we're putting in?
There's sewer repairs included in that expenditure. So it's a 200,000 for the generator plus 86,000 for sewer repairs. So that's where the 286 comes from.
Gotcha.
Capital Projects Water Fund, we allocate 12.3% here of total water revenues to fund capital projects. We've allocated $612,000 to replace the radio reader meter system.
Which I didn't think that we ever decided we were actually doing that.
It was just talked about in the goals and objectives, and the board said, put everything in there and let's see what we look like, so that's how come it's in there.
Yeah, so that's what this is. This is just to get an idea.
So it's included it all.
So, you know, it wasn't in my slides earlier, but I think it's worth, that's a good question. Because something's in the budget, doesn't mean that you've approved buying it. You still have your normal procurement process. So even if something's in the budget that you don't like, you don't have to not approve the budget because that thing's in there. When it's time to buy the thing, when it's time to hire the company, when it's time to spend the money, you still have to follow your procurement process, and you have an opportunity to change your mind or then say, no, that's not something we want to do. Putting it in the budget does not mean you are setting a course that something has to happen.
Absolutely.
So as you can see with the wastewater treatment, we're using fund balance for those sewer repairs and then the purchasing the generator. And then the capital projects, same idea for water. That $612,000 is, you know, a net of $495,000 use of fund balance.
Yeah. So you're putting a good amount of that, what you've saved up over time, into new projects.
Did we ever get a number on what, for that 600-some thousand for the radio reads, how many years of man-hours that covers? How much that'll save the DPW?
Tim did some calculations. I don't have those numbers with me, but I can see, I don't think I do.
The cost benefit analysis just didn't add up, and that's why we dropped it. We wouldn't have, at that time, at the price, I thought it was more than that. So maybe it's better now.
Right, we had a couple of options, whether or not we went with the drive-by read or the radio read, and one of them required an antenna, and one of them didn't. Let me just see if I have that in my.
So the question, how does that benefit our residents? Is if there's not a cost
Well,
benefit?
I don't know that it doesn't, because it's two DPW guys, I mean, all DPW guys working in pairs, walking the street for 2 days, reading the meters, and then a full day or a day and a half for our utility billing clerk to input those numbers. So if you take that man hours, that's way more time that they could be out patching the streets, fixing a manhole cover, doing all those other projects that are now backlogged because we have to get the meters read.
Well, we did, we added, how, was it a year, 2 years ago? We had, that was kind of all estimated.
I'm sorry, what was estimated?
Randy was still on the board, I remember Randy was here.
I don't have those numbers.
Your meter readers are still walking the neighborhoods? That is a very antiquated system. I don't know that I have another client that has that,
Well, we're a square mile, but.
Yeah.
but still.
Well, 2, actually, because it's the industrial
Oh, they
park
gotta-
as well.
They gotta walk the industrial.
Didn't the industrial, aren't those pretty much all, I thought those were more radio over there?
We have no radio reads. We have none. So they would.
Thank you for that bit of information,
Yeah, really.
It's,
We had no
because we
idea.
do have a lot of manhole covers that need work.
Yes. So not only will this help in the industrial park if we change out all those meters, so even if we decide we don't want to fund the whole project, it's Tim's suggestion that we at least start with the industrial park, because we have those exceedances, because they're under Great Lakes water, and we run the risk of a huge rate increase if we can't catch those anomalies as they happen. And having this meter read system would help Tim keep better data versus one report that comes into the iron removal plant. Sometimes they catch it, sometimes they don't, right?
Yeah, I would feel safer doing it in chunks, chunking it out, that way we still have revenue in that fund, should we have a great catastrophe of some sort. However, I
Okay.
do understand that cost goes up over time.
Well, I don't even know if we purchase them now, no one can get meters, that's from what I'm told. Supply chain issues, a whole nother thing, and,
Yeah,
right,
you may
it
be
might
waiting
take
a
2
while.
years to get them. and get them installed. And part of that cost is because the DPW doesn't install them. A company comes in because a lot of those have to be done at night, after hours, on the weekends when the resident is home, right? So it's a total separate company that comes in, just takes care of the project for us.
And I would feel better, at least from my side as a resident, having an outside company. I don't know, there's just a different comfort there.
Right, they send letters, right, you pick a time, you arrange, so nobody's just knocking on the door going, hey, let me in, I wanna change your meter, it's pre-arranged, so. Okay.
Okay. So moving on to the wastewater and water system funds. These funds, we are still pending the water sewer rate study. So these are just all placeholder numbers until that comes in. So once that study does come in, we'll take a look at the budget and then probably propose an amendment once we have that. So for now, we've just estimated a 3% increase to rates and a corresponding 3% increase to expenditures. And that's consistent with the numbers that Christine got from GLEWA. So this is what those fund balances look like. Again, they're placeholders until we can get an actual study back, and then we'll amend then. Building inspection fund, revenue is expected to cover the cost, so we don't need a transfer in from the general fund this year, it looks like. Motor pool fund, we're expecting a 3% increase of the cost for equipment, to use the equipment. The key expenditures in this fund are the 2 snowplow trucks, which are budgeted in this fiscal year, but they're not gonna make it, so we rolled that over to next fiscal year. And as well as the purchase of a backhoe. And these will both be purchased through a advance or a loan from the general fund at 2.94% over 5 years. That 2.94% is the treasury rate as of a couple weeks ago.
So we may end up, depending on what happens with interest rates, it would be in the overall village's best interest to set a variable rate so that it will float as interest rates go up. What's going to happen here is general fund is going to make a little bit of money on this transaction, better than financing it through a third party and your interest is leaving the village. So motor pool, depending on who is using the equipment, water and sewer, street funds, they're gonna pay a rental charge. That rental charge goes into motor pool. Motor pool is gonna pay back general. General pays in as well, but at the end of the day, this is a nice mechanism, the way it's being set up, to help benefit general fund.
Now, does depreciation start with it? When does depreciation start? Should be the question.
Depreciation will start as soon as it's placed in service. It'll be in this fiscal year when it's purchased.
Okay.
So now what you're gonna see, we'll explain. So if you go to the next slide. So here's building inspection fund. Now here's the motor pool fund. You see a deficit. This is a kind of an accounting trick. So this is a full accrual fund, meaning that the loan goes up in the balance sheet. It doesn't go down in revenue and expenditures. Same with the purchase. When you purchase, it becomes an asset. So it's accounted for a little bit different than the general fund. The reason why we showed it this way was just to show that the loan was coming in from the general fund and the purchases were going out for kind of cash purposes, if you want to think of it that way.
Yeah, we won't allow your motor pool fund to end up in a deficit.
No.
Under full accrual accounting. So what will happen is, as the other funds and other departments use the equipment, enough money will come in to compensate for the depreciation, the wear and tear, and any other maintenance on those vehicles. But this does not mean that you're in debt in this fund. It doesn't mean that you're upside down in any way. It's totally fine. There will be adequate funding in the motor pool fund as well as all the other funds. It's not a true deficit. And when I said it's illegal to adopt a budget that ends up in a deficit, I'm not talking about this. This is not part of that.
Okay, retirement fund. This fund is used to pay for the retiree health care. So all the funds kick in money and then we pay the Blue Cross bills for retirees. So there is some money set aside in this fund, $137,000 in fund balance that has just been sitting there for a pretty long time. So we're proposing that we transfer that to MERS for the retiree healthcare funding vehicle to help bump up your total percentage funded and keep that fund net zero, which it has been for years.
Because even though we're out from underneath the reporting requirements of that corrective action plan, we're still following the payment schedule that we agreed to pay. So this is just an additional $138,000 payment that can be invested and start hopefully earning a decent amount of money off the stock market to help fund that at a faster pace.
Yeah.
Or could you do it the other way? Can it go into general and make us money?
Well, you're not, your general fund money doesn't go into the stock market, so you're limited to just very basic.
Or can we put it wherever it would make us money?
Well, I honestly, I think this is your best bet, because by putting this $137,000 into MERS and starting to generate, hopefully, assuming the stock market starts going back up, it's going to lower, as your asset balance goes up, your unfunded portion of OPEB goes down, and therefore your actuary tells you a smaller number that you need to put in, which will then keep you on the right side of the state. So right now, you're getting no credit for the fact that you have $137,000 set aside. The actuary will not count it until it goes into an irrevocable trust, which MERS is.
Can I make a comment? We did something different at the Romeo District Library. We did this about 5 years ago, and it was probably one of the best decisions we did. Washington Township also did that about 7 years ago.
Okay, and last fund is the OPEB trust fund. So as Christine was talking about, we have the required $150,000 contribution to help bump up that funded percentage for those retiree healthcare benefits. So in this fund, we have the general, the water, and the sewer funds contributing to this fund to help pay the $150,000, as well as that $137,000 we just talked about to go to MERS.
So it's a little different than if you looked at last year's budget, because that was never done before, but since our DPW, works in the other areas, and they're getting their retirement, that's why it's appropriate for it to be here.
Yeah.
So you're saying we give 287 whatever?
Yep. So just that 137 is just a one-time extra contribution this year, because as Brian said, the fund balance is just sitting there, doing nothing. So we might as well put it into that funding vehicle. So those are neutral?
Yes, can they be heated too?
Okay.
And cool.
So, any questions?
I don't know if we're gonna go through, just to explain this, okay.
Trying to turn the light on so everybody can read their papers now. We're done with the slideshow. Thank you.
With the benefit, we had this one, for reference
Yes.
sheet, and
Yeah.
page 2, just the numbers, if you can explain with the benefits, there,
Sure. Yeah, so your MERS, this is pension, not retiree healthcare. So you also have pension with MERS. Your MERS invoice is split up between an admin contract, POAM, and AFSCME. Your admin contract, those people that you see, that you highlighted for me, those are all under the admin contract. So to pay for all the people that are in the admin, so retired and active, MERS is having us pay 133% of those 4 active people of their gross wages. So that's what that is.
And that's a big, just an anomaly, kind of a jump that's happened this year as a corrective.
I believe it's been there for a couple of years, because it's MERS is trying to fund that contract pension liability
By accelerating.
by accelerating it.
Those payments.
Yes, and it's only on the people that are in the admin.
Okay.
So I assume that there's more retirees
Yes.
in that division than actives.
There must be. There's only 4 actives, so there must be more retirees in that whole fund.
And yeah, I did speak with Rebecca about that today, and as long as she's been an
I
employee,
was
that's
like,
all she's
wow.
been seeing this.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
where you see the legacy cost.
Yeah.
Yes. legacy costs
Mhm.
are, yep.
So yeah, so that's why those look so high.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Can I speak to the MERS thing for a second?
sure.
So the different, like, the MERS part of it, you're obligated to pay that. And so if your fund balance disappeared at some point, you still have that obligation. And if at some point you don't have enough money in your fund balance just for your general expenses or things that come up, you're still obligated to that MERS money regardless. So the fact that you have the money in fund balance to get rid of that debt, so to speak, is a really good thing. Because otherwise, if you have, let's say you're in a hurt locker situation in the next couple of years and all of a sudden you don't have enough money in your fund balance to fix some major thing, and then MERS is like, hey, you still owe us money over here. There's many municipalities that are upside down with their MERS. So the fact that you guys can do this is if you decide to vote on this, I applaud you, because that's really important. Because of that, like Bob just said, those legacy costs,
They grow
they're killing you.
exponentially.
They're financially killing you, but
Compound.
you're obligated to do them.
Right.
All right. So we have some thoughts, some input, some questions or concerns about the budget and the way that it's presented? Because obviously we're working towards bringing this back, having a public hearing on the 16th. And I'm hoping that we're gonna get a unanimous vote in support of this document, especially the way that Brian has, and Danielle have explained the process this year, that just because they're in there doesn't mean we're bypassing any of our other purchasing, expenditure, appropriations policies. But we did go through the goals and objectives. We talked about it. The direction was, put it in there. It's all in there. We have a balanced budget, so to speak, right?
And is that our goal? Is that our only goal, I guess, should be your question, just to have a balanced budget?
No, our goal is to be fiscally responsible to our residents and all of our taxpayers, right? To make sure that they get the services, that we take into account what their needs are, and to make sure that we can maintain the level of service that they are accustomed to, if not improve it.
Correct. I guess what I'm trying to, in my question, going back to what Brian, right? You were saying, thinking forward, planning. We could plan better with our budgets so that down the road, like you said, when things come up, we have a plan. So how are we doing that in this budget? How are we planning forward in those sorts of areas?
That's a good question. So I would say we haven't really done that yet. We just got here. Let's get this budget for the fiscal year 23 adopted, and I think the next step is to look at a 3 or 5 year forecast.
Yes.
Let's look at all the, employment contracts. Let's, figure out what's going on with inflation, and we can put in a couple what I call toggles. If inflation stays at 8.5%, oh my, we're going to be in some trouble. If it comes back down to a normal thing, what does that look like 5 years down the
Yeah, because I
road?
have a hard time passing a budget without seeing how it affects us down the road. And what are our goals? What are the goals for all of our future budgets? And is this getting us there, or is this not?
Well, if this will put your mind at rest at all, you saw general fund had a surplus. It's generating more money than what you were spending. I think the roads were as well, because there weren't any capital projects.
Right.
For the funds that you were spending more than you were bringing in, it was all for big ticket capital projects, which don't happen every year.
Right.
So you have been saving enough money in previous years to this year then spend that money on the sidewalk, the light, the thing, the whatever. So I wouldn't be concerned that this one-year budget is doing anything to derail any goals you might have as a village. Now, is it providing future, a roadmap for the future? I would say not yet. I don't know that I haven't seen the goals and objectives document. I don't know if that was multiple years,
No.
or if it was just the next year what you wanted to accomplish.
We just go over it yearly, and that's where,
Okay.
that's kind of where I'm heading, is we need to start going one step more. We've accomplished this, we've done that. Now we need to start even adopting multi-year and adjusting as we're going.
I think a capital improvement plan, assessing your needs for your roads, your vehicles, your equipment, your computers, your buildings, what kind of
We need to
maintenance needs to be done on those, or what kind of replacement needs to be done. And then that can all be built into the forecast.
Right, we need to stop having reactionary as we go instead of planning those things out.
I think we've been doing a good job 3 years out. We used to, for years when I was on there, spent whatever it was for 12 months, and I always said we have a 3 to 5 year budget. But we've been planning for the vehicles we need to buy, the big expenditure, and we've been doing a good job going 3 years out, and we need to continue to do that. I totally agree with Megan.
Well, the fact that your fund balance is greater than the village average across the state, that tells me you have been doing a good job. The fact that you have an OPEB trust, many communities don't. Even though those that have very robust healthcare liabilities, that they have not started putting money away. So based on what I've seen, I'd say you're definitely a couple steps ahead. You're on the right side of the spectrum. Where exactly you are, I can't say yet.
The elephant in the room, we've been discussing it now, and we're attacking it with a plan, is our roads. We're looking at bonds, we're looking at a millage, and to be able to tackle that, and we have a 15-year plan to be able to get the roads to 7% and with a 15-year,
That's great.
rating of a 7.
And we are working towards our
But
goals.
that's
Sorry,
a
Bob.
big thing.
Like our sidewalks, they're getting done. We're gonna get them done in 1 year? No. But we've allocated money annually, and we're working towards this. Well, some of our goals are being worked on, it just takes time.
Mhm.
So, you say we don't have any projects for our streets, but I know when we're talking about our roads, that the suggestion was fronting that $1 million out of those. Is that not happening? Is that coming out of next year's budget?
I'm assuming that by the
We
time
have
we
to
get
find-
everything in place,
we have
that'll
to
be
find
next
out
year.
if the millage passes, we have to find out, we're going through with the plan.
Yeah.
But the plan has to include that if the
Yeah.
millage pass.
After the millage, and then you gotta get engineered.
And we have to, and what the
bid and
bond's
all
gonna
that, that
cost.
would be definitely.
So we're
next
just moving
year's-
forward, but
But
at least we have the
going forward
million
with a
as an
plan that
option.
we can't even do.
But in their 2 and 3 year, 4 year, 5 year projections, they might want to assume that this is all going to pass and be able to put this into it. And we could take it out later if it doesn't
But
happen.
we haven't voted to spend
That's
that, we
the only
just
thing I can think of.
have that as part of a package when we develop that package.
And we have saved money for that $1 million. We have that $1 million if that's the plan and the route we choose to go.
But it'll be this board that'll decide the ultimate
And
plan.
Where would it come from? Would it come from those funds?
What, the $1 million?
Yeah.
It would come probably from the general, and it would be put into roads. That's, I mean, if that's
Didn't-
the
I thought
prior
we
year.
looked at
right?
spending a pretty good portion of what was left in the fund.
We still have. What
No,
would be our
for-
fund,
Oh,
this
I-
budget, what's our fund balance? We still have, would have about $1 million surplus, right?
In
Or
the,
we have 3,
in general or major
Yeah.
and local streets?
general,
There was about 3 million.
about 3 million.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, and that's not surplus, obviously, but we have about $1 million that's usable and still stay within our percentages. We'd be at a 70% or,
I'd have to do the math on that.
I know,
Think about it.
we're just hashing it around.
Yeah.
There is about an extra $1 million that we could use.
I mean, you've got 400 in the municipal street fund. There's $1.1 million between major and local streets, and then the 3 million that's in general. So, I mean, you do have a significant amount of
And
money saved.
That's after, if we were to do everything that's in this budget,
That's yeah, correct.
we
Yes.
still have that money left
That's
after,
fiscal
after all of
24.
that. So after we buy the radio reads, after we buy the backhoe, after we, okay. Yeah,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
So to Megan's point on projecting and planning forward, it seems to me, because I'm in the office working in a different capacity, you all have a master plan that's about to be probably approved that you've been working on for a couple of years now. So I would imagine your master plan, much like ours, is going to direct your future goals. So putting the cart before the horse, having the 3 to 5 year plan wouldn't make sense until your master plan's adopted at this point, because aren't you close to adopting that?
Yeah, we're in the 66-day review period time. Yep.
Okay.
mhm.
So I would imagine that would be the next
Yes.
organic
I don't know
process,
how many
would then be
capital, how
looking.
much there is in capital expenditure within that, though, the master plan, as far as affecting our budget.
No, I'm sorry, I'm referring to, like, her concern, like not having a 3 to 5 year plan aside from this 1 year budget.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be the next organic process. is looking at the master plan and saying, okay, in the next 3 to 5 years, what of this do we want to accomplish when you see that? That's my question.
Yes, but that planning helps create and sustain and point us to those long-term objectives.
That's true.
All right, do we need to backtrack and just go over the DDA budget, which is also here? This is, the one that was at your place, set is a little bit different than was in your packet because at the DDA meeting last night, that we made some amendments, so. Right?
Amendments.
Right? Not amendments, well, I guess technically they were adjustments to the budget, revisions, there you go, that's a much better word, so.
Do you want-
By the way, this is Michelle, Michelle is the new DDA accountant. So,
Hi, Michelle.
I don't know if anybody has met Michelle yet or not.
Do you want me to step up?
Whoever wants to go over it, that's fine. You can arm wrestle over it.
Okay.
It's a lot less complicated than ours, so.
If I don't know the answer, I'll just look to her, so.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, let me know. So I guess I could explain it. I like our transitional accountant, Carla Heck, suggested doing the color difference. It's a little, because they all look the same. So the blue sheet is what we talked about when the amended budget was done a couple months ago. The blue sheet is your the category budget, which we're switching to this year versus the line item that it used to be. So the blue sheet here is the one that you would be approving potentially at your budget.
Just so that you know, this blue sheet is the same as the pink top sheet here.
Yeah.
Justin pointed that out to me. I'm like, the pink budget is different, but so.
Oh,
They
okay.
do have it in both blue and pink.
So take the top sheet of your pink one off.
Right.
Yeah, so, sorry, okay, well, we were rushing through this today,
Yep, that's
and
okay.
I apologize for that. So, yep, okay. So, yeah, so the pink sheet should only be 3 pages. So, thanks for the catch on that. That is my bad, not Michelle's, so, no reflection on her, that's completely me, so.
You said that, the pink should be 3, okay.
Yeah.
So the top one
Just
is.
rip the
is
top one
blue,
off and
yeah.
disregard it. Mhm. Do you want me to go through it a little
Do
bit?
you want her to go through each one, or, I mean, because this is part of our budget, part of what we're gonna be voting on in May, so now's the time if we have any concerns or questions, yes.
Sure, okay. So looking at the top of the revenue, you can see that, you know, there's obviously there's a couple different, the 410, the 416, so forth. This year, I had a goal of $20,000 in public donations as a goal. To my knowledge, that has not been something that has been done at the DDA ever. And so there's a lot of interest in donating to things that happen in the downtown area, so that will help offset the budget. And down in there, you see employee expenses, office expenses, professional, revenue sharing, and so forth. All of those categories are then broken down on your pink sheets there. So looking down below, it's interesting because what Plant Moran was talking about is exactly what we were going to explain to you tonight. Total expenditures down there you see is $309,000. If you look up, obviously you're like, well, wait a minute, your revenue is only $224. Revenue that's coming in from the TIF and from the property tax revenue is $204 plus the $20,000 of the public donations goal. And so our total expenditures that we are expecting is $309. But then if you look at under the expenditures under the category 880.050, the CBD revenue sharing, there's $110,000 there, and as you see in the note, $90,000 is expected as a one-time capital improvement, and so that money is coming from fund balance. If you take the $90,000 out of the $309, you'll actually see that we are below the revenue amount that's coming in. So we're actually under budget with our totals there. And then you'll see the projected fund balance in the fiscal, we'd still have a fund balance of $116,000.
Any questions? Any concerns?
One thing I would like to point out, just because it's something that I feel pretty strongly about, if you look on the blue sheet under 880.056 facade sign grant program, it was discovered today by Mr. Zach Hayes. I believe the last time that a grant was awarded was 2014. And so this is something that, we have several businesses that have turned hands that are owned by the properties owned by the business owners. And I think it's really important, it's part of our master plan that you all approved last year to be awarding these dollars. There's a lot of federal money out there and whatnot. I'm getting up to speed on some of that to learn how to help businesses with that as well. It's just another thing that we need to figure out. But these businesses, they're putting more, just like all of us who own old homes in this town, you're putting more money into it than you'll ever get out of it, right? But you do it because you love it, and you do it because you're paying it forward to future generations and future people who are going to own those. And so 2 of the properties I just want to highlight that they won't be able to do anything in time for this fiscal year, so it's going to be next year. We had $7,000 for the current amended budget. That I don't believe any of that will be used based on how our policies are currently for how people apply and they get funded. I had recommended that we roll that into this year so we could actually have that amount be $17,000, and they decided against that last night, which is okay. So it's nice to hear that amending your budget 3 or 4 times a year is kind of normal, because maybe we could bump it up if there's a need for it. But the 2 businesses that are doing a significant improvements is the Main Street Romeo Bar and Grill. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to finally call it, but they're doing they're going to be coming before the Planning Commission with just a beautiful retrofit of their building, which is looking at doing like a track door on the front of it with outside seating, which is like some other spaces. And then MJC Marketplace, which is formerly MI Juntiques, she's looking at putting this huge antique door, with side lights and everything in the front, will completely change the front facade of that at a significant cost. So our little amount here will help offset a little bit if it were to be awarded, but that'll make a huge difference in the northwest quadrant and the northeast quadrant as well in downtown to really help things get improved.
Yeah, I think that's a great program. That's something back when we were on the DDA we had put together, and at the time when it was new, got a lot of interest, and a lot of the nice signs that we have downtown are as a result of that. So definitely, you guys are doing a great job.
Sign's different than facade, by the way.
Well,
They
it's
still
both.
have sign, right, they still have sign, but she's not talking about signage right now, she's talking about literally changing the front of somebody's building.
And giving a little bit
Yes.
of money. I mean,
Yes.
if you're going
Not
to do
paying
that,
for the project.
No.
Not paying for
no,
the project.
just giving them
but
incentive
yes.
to break that.
Yeah.
No,
Sure.
it's
So
great.
to Christine's point, there are 2 different things in that line item. There's facade grants and there's sign grants. So they're 2 different ones. The sign grant I was made aware of last night that it's actually a much simpler process than the facade one. And at some point we're going to be there's a committee that was formed last night to look at some of those and revise some of those policies because they're quite antiquated at this point.
Great.
You touched base about the track door possibly going on the front of Main Street, which
Yeah.
brought up another thing that I was gonna bring up and talk about. When the new JLs is moving in, when that shifted, the parking back, and they're gonna put seating out there, is that gonna be gated off?
At JL's.
Yeah, where this parking got pushed back and they poured the patio there, is that gonna be a gated off section now? Which is gonna
Justin,
eliminate
that's a
the
great question.
walkway?
Well, they have a liquor license, so
There
it'll
has
probably
to
have
be.
to happen.
That was the concern, is now that you could walk along the front of that building after you crossed over in front of, Tar's spot there. But now if you're blocking that off, there's
That wasn't-
nowhere for residents to walk without
that
walking
wasn't-
behind people backing out.
That
You know,
wasn't
Justin,
public
that-
property.
That would probably be a question for the planning commission or whoever looked at all those plans. I was not part of that when that's outside of my wheelhouse, so I don't know.
It happened to be there, but that was not part of the
Well,
right of way.
I can
That's-
respect it, but now it kind of creates an issue plus we're putting the money into the crosswalks too, right? Where the ones right there at that corner.
Right.
People are crossing and then they have to walk through.
But that's private property. They
I
own,
respect
that's-
that, but we're kind of creating an issue. I
No,
think.
because it's always been like that.
So-
There's never been a sidewalk there.
That's not part of my budget
Yeah,
process,
no,
so
I'm
I
not
don't.
saying you brought up coming out from Main Street. was-
So it would be similar seating,
Yeah.
I believe, and I can't speak for them, but I believe the seating would probably be similar to like what Youngers or Urakobe
Yeah.
or the Office Pub would have. So it would probably mirror something like that, I would imagine. Yeah.
All right.
Any other
So,
questions?
Back to the budget. Anybody have any concerns for the DDA budget and the way that they're gonna propose to spend their money?
Just
No, I
what,
watched-
the banner maintenance, does that include anything, do we have issues with the cables on the, for the banners, or are we talking the banners on the?
On the poles,
So not
on the light
actual
poles.
street banner?
Correct.
Did we get anything done with those? I know there was concern at one point with,
We did have them restrung with.
New cables.
Forget what the, yeah, we did. We did. We had somebody come out and restring
before I was
the
on,
safety
but
wire.
they
Yeah.
talked about the structural integrity of that.
The problem with that particular, the south quadrant, is that it's a wind tunnel that gets created down there with that Lombardo building. So
Yeah.
even though you have the same banner hanging in the north end and the south end, the north end seems to be fine. It's just the south end that, you know, gets caught in that wind. So we're actually trying to just limit the banners that go up there and the amount of time that they can hang there so that, but we've been told by the person that we hired who came in, did that emergency repair, that it should handle that wind load from those banners. I don't know that it would handle, if we purchased that big heavy Christmas decoration, that would be a whole nother issue, but the banners should be fine.
And we don't have money in there for a big, huge Christmas thing,
Yeah.
whatever you're talking about. And then I guess the two other things I would point out too is, you know, there is a significant cost for the downtown decorations. It's something that this community is quite used to, and when I came on board, thought there's got to be a way to reduce it, and I really picked the contract apart, and I was shocked at how many planters, over 135 planters, not including the round, the squares, in the ground planting, all of that. It averaged out to only around $141 a planter, plus the maintenance of them. But it's I've you know, reviewed about 6 to 8 contracts of other Southeast metro contracts, and it's quite extensive. So the service we have is actually quite well. So
If you
I've
think
got some
about when
plans
you
for
buy your
that.
mom a flower basket next Sunday, what do you pay for that, right? And so all of ours, 3 times the size, all season long, that are maintained for $140 a piece. Really, when you break it down to that, I was surprised, because I look at the big number of 15 or 18,000 and think, oh my gosh, right? But you break it down to how many we actually have and what we're getting, at $140, it seems like
And downtown looks
it's not that
beautiful.
bad. Yeah.
And then the last thing is just the 880.200 is the CBD events, Central Business District events, and that is something that we are. You know, we're continuing to vamp that up. We've done 2 already this year. My intern just got a capstone project approved last night, so there's going to be a 50s swing dance event happening on July 9th. So more details will come on that. So some funding will come from that item. So there's money left in this fiscal year budget. Plus, she's looking at donations, and that'll actually be across the whole southern part of Michigan. That community is quite extensive that I know nothing about, but she does. So she's quite enthusiastic about that, and she's got our full support. So thank you. If you have any other questions, feel free to call me or email, you know, whatever. So thank you.
Thank you.
So does anybody have any other questions regarding the overall budget, the village budget?
So when we meet on the 16th, we're gonna be voting on it. Will we have all the numbers that Danielle needs to plug in?
Well, right now, all the numbers that we have is what you have.
Right, so the only
Unless
thing
you're
we're,
gonna suggest a change.
The
Well,
only-
I'm just saying, because you were expecting numbers from the state of Michigan.
Oh,
from the county, yeah. So
The
we're
county.
waiting on the millage rollback so we can give you the correct levy number for you to vote on. And that will change the property tax revenue that you see
So we'll have
right
all
now.
that.
You should, hopefully, the county releases it. Yeah,
And if not, you just amend later.
yeah,
Just an end later, there you go.
Because it's a living,
yeah. Because you can adopt the budget before you adopt the levies.
Correct.
Yeah, you can do them separately. So you could adopt the budget and we could adopt the levies before July 1st. But hopefully it doesn't wait that long because we need to get tax bills out.
I think you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
yeah, very nice.
That was excellent compared to what
Any
we.
changes that you wanna see? I just, again, wanna make sure.
Yeah,
We
there's
talked
any-
about having a meeting on the 9th. I don't think we need it, but if we have some concerns, now's the time to air them. Sorry?
I said, I'll just go through this. This is everything, right?
So should we have another meeting before we go to approve this?
Well, we gotta have it on the 16th, right?
I heard, I didn't know what.
On the,
what
on the
summer it
16th, you'll
was.
have a public hearing, and then you'll have this budget, unless somebody's gonna offer a request to change, you're gonna get this budget for approval.
We're gonna get a finalized budget.
Is that the 16th of May or 16th of June?
May.
So if we wanted to take the extra crap garbage out of there, now is the time.
I'm sorry,
So we should
I was
have the
listening to
rubbish.
Catherine.
The rubbish.
So we should have one more meeting.
Okay, tell me what you wanna cover.
I'd like to hit that rubbish.
I gotta get the different numbers for the,
Yeah.
I don't know that I could possibly have that by next Monday, and that's gonna be
And that's what
several,
we were saying, is put
right.
a pin in that for now, not include that, put a pin in that so that next year, we have all the numbers, and we can think about that future.
Or like they keep saying, we
Money
can
will
just
be
amend
sitting
it.
there.
Well, see, that's the problem right here, is as soon as you mention something, then it's defensible on the other side, both sides. So you hate to even say, I'm talking to a resident today, and, you know, they feel that whatever they bring up, you know, is vindictive. That they don't wanna say anything, because it's always rebuttal, instead of listening to the ideals. I mean, this is what this is for, is to get it out and then just talk about it, as opposed to, like Matt just sit over there and he's in defense of whatever she's saying. That's wrong.
I don't understand.
I disagree with that.
That's wrong. That's wrong. So,
I think,
It's
I
hard
think
to
you were in
bring-
agreement with the placeholder, weren't you? I'm
I went through some of this
confused.
thing, and there's a lot of,
We were
The
gonna keep with
120
the fund
You know,
budget
you-
balance
you have a good
and see how
meeting.
we're gonna address it next year.
And you just can't have a good meeting.
No, gotta have some kind of issues.
Pin it, whatever you, it's there.
so are we gonna have another meeting?
get
Yes or
numbers
no?
out.
Doesn't matter. Is that's where you were at. I'd say
I'd
yes.
prefer to not have another meeting, because I mean,
If you want someone to go over it, let's,
Right.
they do it right now.
Motion to adjourn. I'll make a motion.
Well,
Get out of here.
I'll
so
squirt.
no other meeting.
No other meeting.
okay. We have a motion to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Get out of here.
Okay.
Who supported that?
I didn't.
Oh.
Edward?